Our presenter today is Linda Newsom, and she is going to talk to you about native plants in your small yards. So very popular topic these days with everybody having so many small yards around here. So I want to remind everybody this is being recorded, and also that the microphones are allowing the people who are watching from Zoom at home to hear everything in this room. So we need to be respectful of that and mindful that I know I forget myself. Hi, everybody. If at any time you can't hear us, please put a message in the chat box. Also, people on Zoom at home, if you, as soon as you get the chance, if you could please put your first and last name in the chat box, because we have a hard time figuring out who iPad and phone numbers and things are. So we're trying to figure out who's here today. So if you could please put your name in there for us. I believe that's it. Everybody's got their handouts. Don't forget before you leave to fill out the evaluation after the presentation. And we'll turn it over to Linda.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. Well, today we're going to talk about using natives in a small yard. And I have to confess, I got interested in this topic more by necessity than by choice. About 9 years ago, I moved from New Jersey into Delaware. I had a home built for myself in a 55-plus community with an HOA. And when I went to pick out my lot, it was just field after field of weeds. It was really hard to pick a location. You know, one lot looked like any other. Well, the salesman said, not to worry, we're going to put in streets, we're going to grade, everything is going to be fine. So I picked a lot. And this is a picture of the house on move-in day. I was very pleased with the house, thought it was fine, and little did I know that I had picked a very hostile piece of property to build on. And I found out when the rains came. My backyard flooded. It didn't look much better on the side yards or in the front yard. And it took forever for that water to dissipate. And I felt like the house was sitting in the middle of a pond. And one day I was walking back from my neighbor's house, and the lawnmowers were out. And as the lawnmower was crossing my front yard, it actually sunk into the mud and got stuck and couldn't get out. And it went back and forth till it could get out, and it left these terrible ruts in the pond. So that was it. I contacted the builder because I had a 1-year warranty on the house. And after some negotiation, he agreed that he was going to regrade the lot. So out went the lawn, the sod, out went the trees, out went the landscaping package. And this is what the house looked like after I had been there for 7 months. It was a blank slate. I didn't mind that. I thought, oh, okay, now I can, landscape this according to my taste. And I got to work. And the first thing I did, I was very worried about the front beds. When I initially tried to plant anything and I dug a hole, it filled with water. So I didn't trust that the grading was going to be enough. So I had the beds dug out, and they laid a layer of gravel and compost and topsoil and mulch, and it looked like this. And I thought, whoa, now I can plant. None of the plants did well. Half of them died. I was very frustrated. The lawn came in though. That was one of the things. I planted a tree. It got a disease. I had to bring an arborist to save it. So at this point, I kind of understood that my New Jersey gardening skills were not doing me any good in Delaware. I really needed to learn a lot more about gardening in my new state, about the soil, the weather, the plants that grew there. And that motivated me to become a master gardener. And it was a great decision. I have learned so much. I continue to do so, love the people that I work with. And through my continuing education requirements, I was able to pursue my interest in learning about natives and how to use them. And these were some of my gardening goals that I started working with. I wanted to minimize the lawn. I wanted to use a mix of 70% natives and 30% ornamentals, because there were some that I liked. Make compost for the beds instead of using chemical fertilizer. Reduce the use of herbicides in the lawn, and no chemical pesticides on the lawn. I had to learn to water wisely, because you can't overwater a property that has clay, because the water just clings there. It doesn't do anybody any good. In spring and summer, keep up with the weeds, deadhead and trim. In the fall, use leaves for compost and delay cleanup until early spring to protect the overwintering insects. And this last one was very important to me. I was going to use multiple cues to care: edging around the beds, neat lawn areas, hanging baskets and containers. I wanted to have a very welcoming property, and I wanted to have familiar cues for people that I would mix in with the native plantings. Other techniques that I used: I wanted to be sure I had 3 to 5 plants in bloom in spring and in summer and in fall. And I used trees and shrubs with 3 season interests to help me accomplish this, because I'm working in a small space. I planted natives in clusters of 3 to 5 plants so the pollinators could find them. And I used natives that grow no bigger than 3 to 4 feet, because I felt if I had real tall ones, that was going to look very overwhelming in a small space. For a more natural look, I try to keep the natives the same height in the bed, so they look more natural. I do have some shorter ones in front and tall in the back, but they kind of mingle with one another and they kind of go together. And for better egress, I chose well-behaved plantings near my entrance walkway. And I'll tell you later why that was so important to me. And this is a picture of my walkway going up to the front door. I have a rock garden there. And you notice I have low-growing plants. They're all natives. They're all visited by pollinators, but it gives you an easy, pleasant walk up to the front door. Now, this is the landscape plan I started with. Now, I said that, I did a lot of studying on this. I read a lot about how to do this. I went to seminars, and I still couldn't find a lot of information on how to do this in a very small yard. I either saw examples of big pieces of property or examples of what I thought were very strange examples of doing this kind of thing on a suburban lot. You go to the seminar, they tell you the value of doing this, they would show you pictures of the plants, and then at the end, they would give you some examples of yards that use this kind of landscaping. I was very surprised to find I didn't like it. I really had a visceral reaction. I thought they were unattractive and unwelcoming. And I found out later that's not unusual. A lot of people who see these kinds of landscapings don't like them. And I really feel it's because if you're going to use natives and natural landscapes in a small space, you have to balance that with good garden design. Because if you don't, you might really like what you've done to your property. Your neighbors might not. You could get complaints from an HOA or from your town, create a hassle. But more importantly, they're not going to follow your lead. They're going to remain rooted in their beliefs that a sterile landscape is the best landscape. And that's not good for our environment. We need to get more people on board with using natives and the wonderful services they provide to our environment. So I really tried to accomplish that with my landscape plan. However, I was a bit hemmed in by the HOA restrictions. There were 3 big ones. First of all, you could only plant around your house, nowhere else. The property is only 1/4 acre. The building takes up most of that land. And they said the front bed could only be 4 feet and the other beds around the house 2 feet. That wasn't enough area really to plant. So I pushed the envelope a little bit and I pulled out all of my beds. I made them wider. And I put keyholes on 3 sides to accommodate some larger plantings. And I made the beds curved so it would trick your eye. And you really couldn't tell how deep the beds were because they would come out, they would go in. And I really didn't think the HOA people were coming around with a yard sale. So the next restriction was you could only have 2 trees. So I put in a red maple and a river birch. Now we had a new property manager for a single year, and he said we could plant more trees, and that's how I got the sweet bay. And then he left, but thank God they grandfathered the extra trees. So in the keyholes here and here, on the top left and the bottom right, I put 2 small trees to bring my total up to 5 trees. So I have a red chokeberry in one corner and an American elderberry in the other corner. There's a large winterberry holly in the upper right. And there's no keyhole in the lower left because I didn't have enough room to do that without bumping into the tree, and then the lawnmowers couldn't get through. So by doing all of this, I accomplished a few things. Between, I put tree rings around the trees with nice edging. They're rather large. And between doing the tree rings and the big beds, larger beds, I reduced the lawn by 10%. So I made my first goal. I planted 46 varieties of natives and about a dozen non-natives in multiples on the property. So even though it's rather a small space, I was able to fit in a lot of plants, and I still have some extra room. I can't entirely eliminate the lawn, but I do follow the Delaware Livable Lawn Program. So I'm using the minimum amount of herbicides and fertilizer. I only use organic fertilizer. I don't use any kind of pesticides on the lawn. Now, it was too costly for me to dig out the beds on the sides and the back of the house. And the soil was horrible. And I thought, maybe compost would help. But there was an edict that you couldn't do any outdoor composting. So I found out about Japanese composting that you can do inside your house. And it's called bokashi composting. And what you do is you ferment your food scraps by mixing them with the bokashi bran. And when your composter is full, you let it sit. And it ferments the food scraps into pre-compost. Not quite compost yet. And then I go into my garage and I mix a sack of plain topsoil with the food scraps, put it into a garbage can that I keep out there. I let it sit for a little bit longer. The pre-compost becomes compost. And now I have enriched topsoil, very enriched topsoil. And I put that on all the beds. And I did a soil sample last summer on those beds. The soil in the beds is wonderful. No amendments were needed. And so now I don't have to make so much compost. I just make enough to put it around any new plantings that I do. And now I have a nice thick layer of topsoil that's over the clay in the beds. And all the plants are doing very well. Now I'm going to show you the slides of my well-behaved natives. You don't have to take any notes because you've got the plant profiles in front of you. So it gives you all the details on what color they are, what kind of light they need, and their botanical name. So you can just look at the pictures. And I'm only going to talk about the ones that have something notable. So some will just give you the name and some will talk about it a little bit. I'm going to start out with the blossoms of spring. This is green and gold and field pussy toes. They're spreading beautifully in my rock garden next to the sidewalk. Visited by pollinators, they're lovely plants to have. I really like those pussy toes. They're cute. There's blue-eyed grass. Again, that's in the rock garden. And in the back, I have dwarf crested iris. And then I have Solomon seal. It's growing around the pole for my birdhouse. Now, I must tell you, this is not a native. This is a cultivar. Of course, I thought it was a native. I was given this by one of my friends who said, I have a lovely native plant for you that grows in the shade. She didn't know, it's a cultivar. The straight species has a green, solid green leaf. So if it's tipped with the white, it's a cultivar. I'm not upset that it's there because it doesn't act very much, it acts almost the same as the straight species. And it has the beautiful leaves. It still has they're called racemes with the upside down blossoms. I wouldn't say it's a pollinator magnet, but it's a beautiful plant to have because when you're dealing with natives, you have to be careful that you don't have a lot of green, you know, a short bloom period and then green for the rest of the time, which could look a little boring. So having something with a variegated leaf or a striking blossom is a good thing to break up that green. So now we'll go and look at my secret weapon, my trees and shrubs. I try to have trees and shrubs with blossoms for the pollinators and berries for the birds. So first thing I see in the spring is a dwarf fothergilla. It has those beautiful white blossoms with the yellow centers. And in the fall, I get this beautiful color in my front border. Now, when the fothergilla comes out, it's still rather cool. It's early, but believe it or not, it was covered with hoverflies. You know, I didn't see, so I was happy that it was serving a function even that early in the season. The insects are looking for food. Another early one is my red maple. I used to think that these red things were buds. Well, actually, they're flowers, and they're very attractive to pollinators. It's always buzzing in the early spring. And again, it's a food source that comes out quickly. And then you get your nice shady green tree in the summer, and in the fall, I get the pretty color. And in the meantime, it's providing shelter for birds, nesting places, shading my house. Good tree to have. Here's my red chokeberry. It has beautiful blossoms in the spring. They're white, chipped with red. And in the fall, again, I get the red berry fruit. Very attractive. If the birds would hang around in my neighborhood, they would eat them. Because the community is relatively new, there aren't a lot of trees. So what happens when it gets cold, the birds take off. But I hope someday we'll have enough trees that they'll stick around to eat. This is a spice bush. Spice bush is becoming very popular now because it's now known as a host plant for the swallow-tailed butterfly. And in the springtime, fairly early on, the stems are covered with these little yellow flowers. They look similar to a forsythia. And the blossoms come out before it leaves. And then in the fall, again, I get the colorful foliage. The birds love hiding in this bush, but there's something about a spice bush you should know. Whenever a spice bush is advertised, it tells you it has beautiful red berries. It's not quite true. Spice bush is dioecious, which means you need a male and a female, and it's very hard to find a female. It seems to me that the nursery people are propagating or cloning the parent tree, and they're cloning a lot of males. So there's a lot more males out there than females. So I'm still on a hunt for a female. I want my berries, got my blossoms, got my fall color, want my berries. So that's my quest. Gardening is never finished. And there's my sweet bay magnolia, and it's known for its beautiful white fragrant blossoms that come in the spring. In the fall, you get the red fruit, which is very attractive. And the leaves are semi-evergreen, so it doesn't lose its leaves right away. So from summer through late fall, early winter, you're getting some nice benefits from this tree. I always have birds in this tree. They use this as a landing pad between the bird feeder and the tree. So it's lovely to look at out of my bedroom window too. Here's the American elderberry. And notice that it's in bloom and it has a flat fluorescence, which means it's made up of a lot of tiny little flowers. And each one of those flowers is going to turn into a black berry. Very attractive to the birds. Look at the other picture. That's what the bush looks like about 4 days after those berries ripen. the birds just are there. That tree shakes. There are so many birds. So what I do, I cut off the stems and just enjoy the greenery after that. But the birds wait for that tree. And I'm happy to feed them. This is a viburnum. I learned the hard way that a viburnum likes to have company. It will give you much more blossoms if you have more than one of them. Even though it has male and female parts, it prefers to cross-pollinate. It also gives you, when it's in bloom, the flat fluorescence, and these are the berries. Birds love these. I would swear they eat them when they're green. They don't even wait for them to get all purple. And they're gone in a minute. And this is the pollinating partner for my other viburnum. It's shorter, it's younger, has the same kinds of fluorescence. And there you can see the berries, and they're half eaten already. So they're quite a delight. Next, this is a St. John's wort, and it's in the front border. And none of the shrubs in the front border, except the viburnum, get taller than 3 feet. So I keep them right at the windowsill level so we don't look like we have a forest. And in the summer, covered with yellow blossoms that are a magnet for bees. They love the pollen there and the nectar. And then in the fall and winter, you get these bronze seed heads, and it holds on to its leaves fairly long. So it gives you interest in that time of year. And if the birds were there, they would have something to eat. Next is an itea, and it has a very unusual shape to the blossoms. It's a fluorescence. It's long and thin, covered with these tiny blossoms. It is a pollinator magnet. They're all over this one. And in the fall, again, I get that nice color in my front border. Next, that's a clethra, and it has the same kind of fluorescence with the little blossoms on the stem. Again, pollinators love this one, and there's the extra benefit that it has a lovely fragrance, really lovely. And in the fall, you get that beautiful color and the beige seed heads. Again, the front border, it's not all green all the time. So it goes from blossoms to green to color. So it looks a little lively out there, but yet it's still performing a lot of eco services. Now in my back shrub border, my favorite plant back there, it's on either side of the spice bush, is my beautyberry. And look at those purple clusters of berries. They are just gorgeous, and they contrast beautifully with the green leaves. They come in the late summer and they stay for a very long time. I would say more midsummer, and they stay for a very long time, and really a very attractive shrub to have. And again, if the birds hung around, they'd have a nice lunch. Now in the fall, I have my goldenrod. It's called Fireworks. It's a rough goldenrod. The variety is Fireworks because of the arching stems. And again, this is a pollinator magnet. They're covered with all kinds of things because there's not a lot around at that time of year. And next to it is my winterberry holly. And this is like taken in the fall, and it's nice because you still have the green leaves, so it looks red and green. You get further into the winter, the leaves fall off, the berries get bigger, and you have nice red berries. And this really looks very nice from the street. Even though it's on the side, you can still see it. Now, the blooms of summer. I'm starting off with a baptisia. It's a very interesting plant. Looks kind of large, doesn't it? It's never going to get bigger than that. And on my sunny border, I have a bump out bay that faces my dining area. And so I put the baptisia back into the corner so it wouldn't overflow the bed. And the reason why it's not going to get much bigger than that is because it has an interesting pattern. It grows from a taproot. And at the end of March, you cut this plant down to the ground. And that's what stimulates it to grow again. So this is 1 year's growth. So it doesn't grow each year higher and higher. It's 1 year's growth every year. And after the blossoms fade you get these black seed packets, and the seeds inside will rattle when the wind blows through it. It's very attractive to pollinators, and it gives me some nice color there. I really like that. This next one, 9-bark, that's not a native. It's a cultivar. There are many cultivars of 9-bark. The native plant is going to have plain green leaves, and it's going to grow tall real fast. So you would need a lot of room for straight species. So this is a cultivar that is more compact. It also has bronze purpley leaves. Now, when you see that color on a leaf, you have to be a little concerned because the feeling is the plant will produce less pollen. That hasn't seemed to be a problem with this plant. It's still visited by pollinators. And you can see on the plant, you can already see the pink buds opens up into white flowers, and it's visited by pollinators. So I'm not too upset about that yet. It has its nice corner. It has a good habit. It's kind of spiky, but this is a new plant. This is only my second year with it, so I'm not sure whether it's going to stay that way or fill out. Time will tell. But sometimes when you have a small property, cultivar is not the worst way to go. Next, I want to show you my butterfly weed. Beautiful orange color. Butterfly weed only grows 2 feet tall. It also grows with a taproot. So if you're going to grow common milkweed or swamp milkweed, it's much taller, it spreads fast, it's hard to control in a small space. Not so with the butterfly weed. Not only is it short, like about 2 feet, it grows from a taproot. So like the Bethsesia, you're going to cut it off at the end of the year, and it's going to grow back the next year. So when my lovely caterpillars strip it bare, I'm not concerned. Just cut it down, it'll come back. And obviously they do a good job on the plant. Next is a salvia. Even though salvia is a native plant, there are many cultivars of salvia. That's May-night, and I like it because of its deep purpley blue color. It still gets visits. It's a clumper. You'll notice that a lot of the plants I'm showing you are clumpers. They're not spreaders because they are easier to control in that small space. Now, later in the summer, behind the salvia, oxeye sunflowers are going to come up. And they have this deep, deep golden yellow color. You're going to see it later on. So when you contrast the purple with the golden color, you're putting together the most attractive color combination for pollinators. They are very attracted to that. So even though the salvia may not be a magnet for pollinators, it is in the sense that it's going to attract them over to the sunflowers. So that's a combination that I use over and over again in my garden. This next one is called a closed bottle gentian. That means the blossom is very, very closed. Hard for a pollinator to get in there. So this is not a pollinator magnet. But I have it in my garden for a couple of reasons. It's a clumper. It's easy to control. It grows in the part shade, and it has very unusual blossoms. They're like these round, deep purple blossoms. They do get paler as the summer goes on, but look at the leaves. As the blossoms get pale, the leaves turn yellow. So you're getting some of that purple yellow punch. You're getting it later in the season, and it sparks up the bed. When other flowers are gone, you get this colorful thing in its place. So I'm trying to keep the garden beds looking lively through the seasons, and the gentian helps me do that. This is a rubilia, which is our native petunia, and it has this lovely periwinkle blue color, and the buds start out with yellow tips. Very lovely. It's a clumper. And it's a nice filler for the garden. So I'm going to be, I tried just one plant with this to see how it would go, and I like it, and I'm going to be placing more around it. And then, of course, you know yarrow. again with the flat fluorescence, and see how easy it is for the pollinators to get in there? That's why it's so attractive to them. I have bee balm, I have purple coneflower, and I have penstemon. I also thought that was a native plant. It is not a native, it's a cultivar. I got fooled again. It happens. You have to be really careful when you read the labels and talk about, to the grower what the plant is all about. So I was a little miffed that I didn't get a straight species native. So what I did was the following year, I planted a straight species in our community garden. The garden club plants flowers around our clubhouse. And it was a disaster. My fellow members hated it. Where did you get that? Because it flopped, because it had really long stalks with the flowers and it flopped over and it was hard to contain in the bed. So sometimes there's a reason why a cultivar is a cultivar. This one is very compact. The blossoms, the stems are about 2 feet high. They stay upright. The straight species, I didn't feel it really attracted a lot of pollinators. So this was about the same. And what you get with this plant, this cultivar is called Husker Red. After the blossoms are gone, you have a clump of leaves that turn purple as you go into the fall. And the leaves are semi-evergreen and they stay there so that I still have some beautiful color in my beds after the flowers are gone. That's turtle head. I like this plant. It's a shade plant. It's tall. It's about 3 feet tall, slow, at least in my garden, to spread. And the thing I like about it, like the closed bottle gentian, it has a blossom at the top and the bottom, but it has an opening that's big enough for the pollinators. So the fun thing to do is to see the bumblebees wiggle their way deep into the pollen and you see their little butts hanging out the end. I have to get a picture of that. I wasn't able to photograph that this time, but it's very cute to see. And then I have the obedient plant. What a great clumper. Very good habit. Gets about 2 feet tall, gives a beautiful color. Pollinators like it. And they say if you put your finger near it, it will turn toward you, and that's why they call it obedient. So it has a cute habit. Here's the oxeye sunflower, and you can see that deep golden color to it. And next to it is a giant hyssop or an agastache, and it has these tall lavender blooms. And look how it contrasts against the lighter leaves. So again, I'm getting that purple yellow. It's a little taller. It's one of my taller plants, and it's on the other side of the bump out window. So I have 3 plants tucked in the corner. They don't overgrow the bed, and the pollinators are all over this one. And it's really attractive. This is mountain mint. Mountain mint is one of the best pollinator plants you can have. But it's a mint, which means it spreads. But luckily, the stolons are very close to the surface. So what I do is I pop them up and trim them off. Easy to do. I only have to do that once or twice in the summer, and it remains in its space. And I don't mind doing that work because the pollinators like it so much. I also have black-eyed Susans. There's cardinal flower, great blue lobelia, and Indian pink. I love the contrast in this flower between the yellow and the red. Now these last 3 flowers are sun part shade, and what I found in my garden in that particular spot, they can't take the afternoon sun, even though it's there for only a couple of hours, so they're going to have to be moved. So what I'm doing in my garden now, since the summers are really getting hot, I'm watching to see where I have to put them. So I've been doing some switching around. And so this bed, because those 3 plants are in the same bed, are all going to be moved, and then I will put something more hardy in their place. But definitely worth having. So far, mine are clumpers. I think over time they might spread a little more, but in the 2 years that I've had them, they're clumping very nicely. Now, I want to talk to you about this plant. I call it an heirloom sedum. I don't know too much about this plant's history, except by what my friend has told me. I got this as a division from a friend, and this was a good one. There was a custom in her family for several generations that when anyone in the family bought their first house, they got a division from this plant, and they handed it down and handed it down. So this plant has not been very hybridized. I was very lucky when I bought my first house. She gave me a division, and it's been a wonderful plant. It's very, very easy to propagate. You could take just a stem from this, stick it in the ground, you get a plant. It's also nicknamed the forever plant because you can't kill it. It just grows and grows. And it has these nice blossoms that come out late summer into the early fall, and pollinators love it. Look at this. There is a wasp on it, a moth on it, and a bee. And that's the way it is. It is covered, and sometimes it looks like it has black polka dots because there's so many bumblebees on it. Now, what you see in the garden centers now, they usually call it a tall sedum. Now, this is on my side sunny border, and my neighbor on the other side has the tall sedum there. And it has the very fancy edges on the leaves, taller stems, and then you see blossoms. It gets no visitors at all, none, because they're all here. So they know what to do. And it's an interesting contrast between a very hybridized plant and one that is not so much. I don't know if that's a straight species, because great-grandma probably didn't know either in my friend's family. But there's a big difference in its value to the pollinators, and it's one of my treasures. So if you ever see one of these, try to get a division. I've never seen it in the nurseries, but if you have a friend that has one, don't be shy to ask. You'll love to have it. Isn't that a beautiful flower? Look at that beautiful bloom. And it comes out, it blooms in late summer into the fall. Unfortunately, it's a thug. This is a very aggressive spreader. And I bought this plant at a native plant sale at a very famous arboretum. And nowhere on that plant tag did it say it was aggressive spreader. So I learned my lesson that don't make spontaneous choices in a native plant sale because you have to do your research ahead of time. So what I do now, if I have a space for a plant, I kind of figure out what color I want, when I want it to bloom. I do my research, I look at the plant profile, and then I buy it. I've been trying to get rid of this plant for 4 years. It comes back all the time. It spreads by rhizomes. They're deep in the ground. So you really have to dig it out. And the rhizomes snap. So if you leave just a little bit, you're going to get a plant the next year. Now, last summer I injured my foot and I wasn't out in the garden as much as I should have been, and that's what happened. Usually I keep after it so it doesn't grow this way. It's pretty, but it needs a whole lot of room. It's not really appropriate for a small space. Now, the tall tick seed is a different story. It is a taller plant, but it's very airy. And what I did, I planted this under the palladium window in my sunroom, a very wide, very, very tall window. So you wouldn't want a real shrimpy plant in front of it. So the tall tick seed fits the space. And because it's so airy, it's not blocking any light into the sunroom. It looks very nice. I would say it's a moderate spreader, but it's easy to divide. And my neighbors have no trouble in taking my plants. So they wait. So I can easily give it away. And, you cut it down in the fall and then it pops up again. It's a good plant. It's in the right spot. It likes it there. And it balances out my big window. So in the fall, it's aster time. And the plant on the left is a white wood aster. I don't think it's a particularly attractive plant. To me, it's small blossoms, too busy. I don't like it that much for beauty. However, it grows in the shade. It grows in the sun. It grows in poor soil. It grows in good soil. This plant will grow anywhere. And because it's coming out in the fall, pollinators gravitate to it. It doesn't spread very quickly. I do divide it because this is a popular plant to give away, but it seems like it heals very quickly and it goes back to its mound. So it's nice to have in your garden for that. Of course, I have New England asters. Now, this is what my front yard looks like now. Now, you may look at that and say, well, that's no great shakes. It looks like anybody else's backyard. But that's the point. It's not off-putting. My goal is that when people pass by my property, they say, hey, look at that. I can do that in my yard. Instead of having them pass by and say, oh no, what has she done? That looks awful. And even though it looks very, what could I say, plain, it's still providing lots of eco services. And it's been certified as a wildlife habitat by the National Wildlife Federation. And the nice thing is, I was the first person in the neighborhood to do that. Now there's 14 of us.
Yeah.
And I have other neighbors that are planting natives. They don't want to go the full certification route. So I've made a little impact. Now, that's 20 people, and there's 100 homes in the neighborhood. It's better than none. It's better than one wild landscape. I'm engaging people. I'm helping them to become familiar with a new way of using plants. And I feel successful for doing that. So I'm going to charge all of you today to do the same thing, to take some of these ideas home with you, try them out in your yard, and start a movement in your neighborhood. All right, so if you look at your handouts, you have resources and a bibliography. And look, I know that not everybody likes to garden, so I included this handout, which is tips for an armchair eco-warrior. This is for your neighbors who don't want to garden. And in the front, I have some easy things that they can do in their landscaping that doesn't take a lot of effort. And in the back are some other hints for things they can do to conserve resources, which is important too. And that helps our environment. So whether they are outside with clippers or inside with a clicker, there's something they can do. And if there are extra handouts, please help yourself to them and pass them around. Try to spread the word. So, any questions at this point?
We have some on Zoom.
Okay.
Someone at the beginning wanted you to repeat what you said about overwatering clay soils.
It's always a good idea to water wisely. Water is a limited resource. But when you water, like my landscaper would say to me when the new sod went down, water 25 minutes a day. Now, I knew that was going to flood the backyard because the water does not easily trickle down through the soil. So I'm very careful. If it's rained the day before, irrigation's turned off. Because I try very hard to have a balance to keep the plants hydrated, but not overhydrated.
Another question was, do you ever prune some of those fall bloomers back in May or June to keep them shorter?
I trim everything. Yeah, that's true. When you have native plants and they're happy where they are, they tend to grow. So at the end of the winter, like in late March, maybe the first week in April, I'm out there with my clippers so I can see the shape of the plant. So yeah, you have to keep them in check.
But not before they bloom, because I think they were
No.
asking in May, June.
If you want a second bloom, you can do that. You can do a midsummer light pruning to cut it back a little bit to get a second flush. If you want, that could be done, but you got to have a light hand.
And then there was one more question on Zoom. Can you add annuals into the native garden to add seasonal color?
Of course, I don't like that much work. I'm a lazy gardener. You have to do the annuals every year, but absolutely. I do have them in the baskets and in the containers on the property. Yes, I do use them to keep the color going.
One of the things I got out of the Mount Cuba class about the cutting them back to try to get a later bloom or to keep them shorter was they said plants like asters, like the New England aster, if they're getting real big, as long as you cut them back before July 4th, that was like the magic date. You do it after that, they won't bloom again. But if you, like mine are getting really big, so I'm gonna try. I've never done it before. I'm gonna give them a good haircut in the next, probably in a month, so that they're shorter, and then see how they do. And I might regret it, but that's what I was told in one of my classes there.
That's good information to have. Thank you.
And also somebody asked, do you use ground covers as mulch?
I've been trying that out. I'm trying to get away from using mulch. But you have to be careful because sometimes the ground covers can be very aggressive. So in my rock garden, my guys are spreading, and I'm not ever going to put more mulch there because they're going to take over. I like the ground covers because they can bring in color, but I've been more interested in ones that are not native. I've been working with yugaweed or ajuga and lamium. And I've been trying that out in sections of the garden to see how it's going.
I have ajuga. It's spreading like crazy. It's filling in everything, but I'm not, is ajuga native?
No.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
And I have, I also have phlox, the creeping phlox.
That grew so slowly for me. In
Really?
2 years, I had this much. So I kind of gave up on that. But it depends on your soil, what's going to work. Now, the ajuga is spreading much better for me. So that may be what I use.
It
Yes.
spreads everywhere.
Yeah.
It gets in your, we just mow it over into grass, so.
So
It
yours
was
has
in
gotten
flower beds,
aggressive?
but it just has kind of inched its way out, so I'll dig it up and I give some to my sisters and I dig some, the bigger ones. I give some to my daughter. She kills everything, but
Well, the thing I worry about with the lamium, it's very beautiful. It has the pink flowers and then it has the beautiful white leaves with the green. It really doesn't like sun at all. And so my beds in the front and the back are part sun, part shade. So that has been kind of a mixed experiment. So I'm still in the process of looking. I take suggestions.
And somebody said, I made a mistake with my 9 bark. I pruned it in winter. No blooms this spring. I guess I should have pruned in summer.
Oh, I would look that one up because I usually do it before it blooms. You know, on the 9 bark, it's a rather neat plant. I found a dead stem on it and I clipped it off. So I left it because I'm not really sure what its shape is going to be yet. I usually do not prune my new shrubs until I'm really sure of their shape. So I leave them alone the first year. And maybe the second year, I'll start a little trimming until I see how it's going to look. But I would really research that. I really can't tell you.
I've never pruned mine. I let it go wild, but mine is the native one.
Yeah.
The native one, and I swear that thing was a twig when I planted it, and now it's like probably a good 10 feet wide.
Well, that's the native. It grows fast and it grows tall, and that's why the cultivars are more compact. But this one I'm still learning about.
And mine, when it touches the ground, it reroots.
But
It's fine with me. I have a lot of space.
that would not be fine for me.
I know. I don't have a small yard.
So that's why sometimes the cultivars are there for a reason.
Right.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Judy has another one. The ajuga will burn out in sandy soil, as I found last year. We are trying Pachyera aurea, is that how you say it?
I don't know.
In the Sussex Meadow Garden as a ground cover.
Oh, well, I'll have to look that one up because, you know, the mulch gets crusty, you know, and then it's not good for the plants. You have to keep breaking it up. So I would love to get rid of it. But it's good at keeping the weeds down. I like to use it when the garden was new and all the plants were small and I wanted to keep down the weeds and keep in the moisture and not water. Mulch was good. Now the property is a little more mature. I'm trying to get away from it. Yes?
2 questions.
Yes.
How many years have you been working on your new home garden?
Well, I've lived there for 9 years, and so I would say I really got into it year 2, after I had so many failures. So I would say 7 years.
All right, thank you. I'm beginning myself downtown. And I am completely enthralled by your rock border. I see there's some places, I lived in a kind of community like yours where, you have to have the deep dig at the edge of the grass for your beds. And that's not true where I am now because I can do what I want. But I love the fact that you have rocks and then the mulch to the tree. And then on the other side, perhaps lawn or what have you. What is your source for the rock? How does that work out?
Can I be honest with you for
Actually,
a minute?
please be honest, brutally.
I'm going to be honest. The rocks are leaving. The rocks were excellent when the lawn was new and it wasn't growing very fast. Now that lawn is 7 years old, it's growing very aggressively and it's growing right through the rocks,
I saw
under
that.
the rocks and into the bed. So I'm going to have them removed because I simply do not want to go through the work of taking the grass out. It's just too much. As we get older, it's garden smart, garden easy. And those rocks at this point in my yard are neither easy or smart. So they have to leave. But they were pretty. I have to admit that I really like the natural look to them. And I'm going to dig out the bed like it is in the front, just and have a more natural edge. It's just easier for me.
Do you or anyone have any comments on a brick edging for beds?
Does anyone use a brick edging?
I used to use it when I lived on State Street downtown. And it's pretty if you can get it even, you have to dig and you have to put in sand and you have to do a lot of moving around. And then as roots and things grow, the bricks start to come up and it does require a little more maintenance than you would think.
Well, I had a brick edging for my garden and it was a keyhole kind of enterprise in my backyard in Alexandria, Virginia, which held up for 30 years.
I had a
Remember, you
brick,
have different soil in Virginia than you do.
I had a brick edging in Atlanta, and what happened was our house got hit by a car, and our house was brick, and they had to repair it, and then they had a whole bunch of leftover bricks. So I'm like, what am I going to do with these? So I ended up digging a little trench, and I put them in at an angle, so it was all like this, and it worked great there. I mean, we had a Bermuda lawn in Atlanta, so we didn't have a lot of problems with it getting into the cracks and things. It worked great for me.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
I also put a brick around mine. I have similar HOA requirements like Linda. I can't garden more than 4 feet out from the sides of my house. And so when we first moved in, it was of course grassed right up to the house. So I set my gardens where I wanted them. And then as I had more funds available, I would pull the grass out on the inside of the bricks and put a garden in. And so I laid them flat. The other HOA restriction is they can't be taller than the grass. And so I laid them flat-wise, width-wise, so that my husband could put the lawnmower wheel on it and just mow down the garden.
Love those HOAs.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. You have a copy of the bibliography and the resources about flowers. These are some services that Kent County Master Gardeners provide. And I want to let you know that this fall, we're starting a new class for new Master Gardeners. So if you're interested, you can go to our website and get more information. And this is our equal opportunity disclaimer. Thank you very much.